Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. I am Simply G, and today I'm going to be showing off all of the everything that I got for this month, manga wise. There's a bit of merch here as well, different filming spot. I don't know whether this will continue to be where I film my manga videos, but yeah, we're still in a process of experimentation in my new place. So yeah, I'll just get straight to it, and I hope you guys enjoy. Ooh. Not a sound I like. We have some clear files from that same series. This is Heaven Official's Blessings clear files, most notably featuring the main character, but we do have one with a couple on it. So this is the first one, and these are multi-layered, so they actually have this part and then this part here, and so you can actually fit multiple different papers in there, and there's this kind of this diorama effect with it. We also have this one as well, which is like so. Again, we've got that front piece, a little less diorama, but still some background and foreground art, and then just kind of the back page. Very lovely, very nice, and yeah, very happy to have them. A whole bunch of free clear files as well. This is for this year's birthday series from KyoAni. First of all is Nagisa for the wonderful birthday party birthday series. So him, we have Natsuya, and finally we have now. These are like all the free birthday clear files, released in order of the characters' birthdays. So as soon as their birthday happens, quote unquote, I mean these are fictional characters, but once their birthday has arrived, that's when they get released. So the next one in the series, I believe, is either, I think it's Sosuke, it might be Makoto, can't remember, doesn't matter. So yeah, I have quite a few on order, so they will just keep arriving as they keep being released. We have a couple art books, the first one being for Blue Period. This is a ongoing manga about art school, and our main character who kind of finds a love and passion for or as an artist, I should say, a little bit later than most people who are wanting to get into art school. So we have a lot of exploration of different pieces of artwork featured in the series, and kind of the different styles as well. There's a lot of interviews in here too, some comics, and then of course official artwork. Great little book, and not super duper expensive. It is hardcover, so check it out if you are a fan. A highly anticipated art book for me, one that I've been waiting for for what feels like years. The first one came out quite a while ago, so this is the second art book for the 12 Kingdoms. This collects both colored and black and white artwork for the light novel series. And oh my goodness, it's so lovely. I one day hope we see this series back available in print from one of our light novel publishers, because I would pay so much money for the series. I need it in my life. It's so wonderful. If you haven't watched the anime adaptation, you can get that. I think it's currently with Discotheque. I don't know. I don't remember. It's been released multiple times by multiple different companies, so hunt it down if you haven't tried it yet, because it is well worth the watch. Next we get into the manga. Like last month, I haven't read all of this quite yet. I've just been so busy with the house, and I've been working some weekends as well. It's a busy time of year for me, so I have read some of them, not all of them, so apologies that I can't give a full review or impression on many of them, but I will start with my one-shots that I got for the month. The first being Be Very Afraid of Kanako Inuki. This is a horror collection of one-shots, single chapters from, well, this single artist, several different stories, several different kind of horrific outcomes, mostly focusing on children and kind of mysterious and creepy and horrifying things that happen to them. It's an interesting collection. It's very well suited for this spooky season that has just passed. It's really nice to see kind of a variety of horror manga being released, and if you are a fan of horror, and especially kind of classic horror, more so in the style of like Hideshi Hino or oh my goodness, Umez, that's who I'm trying to think of, then check this one out. It is brilliant, vibrant, just really has some great moments to it. I wouldn't say it's like overwhelmingly horrific or scary or off-putting. I mean, it is off-putting. I think it's a fun collection of stories, and if you're interested in trying some different horror, then check it out. Have Kodansha's release of Skygrazer by Masakazu Ishiguro. This is a creator, I've read some of his work previously, Heavenly Delusion, released by Denpa Books, and I haven't read this one yet, so I cannot speak to it, but it looks very interesting. It seems to be very much in Ishiguro's style of kind of like weird sci-fi, close, dystopic or near dystopic futures and kind of characters and especially teens navigating through that. As I said, I haven't read this one. I couldn't tell you exactly, like that might be totally incorrect. That's just my impression from flicking through it and reading the back, but yeah, I'm always happy to try kind of interesting series or especially one-shots from creators that I've previously enjoyed. So yeah, it was a fun surprise, and I do like when a publisher decides to give us like single volume collections and one-shots, just because I do think that that's a really easy way to be exposed to different mangaka and to learn more about different genres, and yeah, it's just kind of a great opportunity for more people to be exposed to certain creators' works. A book that is somewhat of a rebuy for me, which is not often this happens. It's one that I unhold, not because I didn't like it or that I wasn't a fan, or that I didn't see having any value, but it's a book, one that comes from a creator that I really enjoy, but it was a book that I hadn't seen myself rereading. But I found kind of a new application or a new perspective on this book very recently, and that is Shigeru Mizuki's Onward Towards Our Noble Deaths. This is the reprint or the newer version from Drawn and Quarterly of the single volume from Mizuki. As you can see, I have all of his books, for the most part. I don't think I have Nononba anymore. Maybe. I don't know. I do have a majority of his works. And when I was unhauling initially, this was a book that, although I found very powerful and very good, well done, having also read Showa and owning Showa, I saw this as kind of superfluous insofar as a lot of the same things, a lot of the same dynamics and stories were being told between the two. If you don't know, if you're not familiar with Mizuki, he, during his life, was a soldier, Japanese soldier in the Second World War. He was posted in Papua New Guinea, much against his, better judgment and his own personal views on the kind of ongoing conflict that Japan was placing themselves in throughout the war. So he, after coming home, he did survive that. He became, staunchly anti-war. Absolutely hated it, but hated the aspect of being in war and being a soldier and the atrocities happening and just the total disregard for life from Japanese soldiers, but also like higher up in the military chain towards their own soldiers. The idea of, the honorable suicide, and so all sorts of things, all of which are touched on and explored in Onward Towards Our Noble Deaths. This idea of, dying for, the glory of your country is truly the most noble of deaths, even though the reality is that it's just a complete, total waste of life, needless waste of life, and really doesn't achieve anything except for more horror, more horrific just acts of violence and hatred and decimation. Anyway, war is never a fun time anyway. But the reason that I picked this book up again is because I've found this one to be a book that I very often want to lend out, recommend, share around with both friends and family, because it's it's shorter and than Showa, and it's also just kind of a little less daunting compared to like a complete history of the Showa period from 1926 to 1989, which is what Showa is. That's not to say that you couldn't just pick out, the two books that kind of cover the largest chunk of the war. But this one's just easier. So I also see it as, I think it's very valuable to be able to share the story and to kind of open up the conversation about Japan's involvement in Asia throughout World War II. Living in Australia, which is obviously a country very close to Asia, it was the Australian soldiers, the Anzacs, as well as various other Commonwealth colonies who were sent to kind of fight against the Japanese throughout the Second World War. And, I think, especially in the US, the conversation about Japan and World War II is very focused, like, it's very US centric, which is understandable, but it's a completely different dynamic to what was actually happening in Asia for a majority of the war. So, I think most people, when they think about, in the US particularly, when they think about Japan and World War II, they think about Pearl Harbor, and then, of course, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? Like, those are the big things, and they are the big things, right? But also, Japan was just invading the entirety of the Asian continent, and it truly was like a huge, huge part of the war that gets a little bit forgotten amidst all of the other atrocities happening across Europe. The bombing of Pearl Harbor, getting the US directly involved, and then obviously the horrific instances that then ended the war. Like, there's so much bad stuff. Obviously, war's not a fun time. It's never a good time. But I think this, especially in a country that was directly involved with the Japanese, with World War II, in a very different way than the US was, it's good to have this available as part of the conversation and to open up perspectives. I also think it's a very good thing to have available in the US, where maybe some of this history isn't as well known comparatively. I see this specific particular book as something that has great value as a sharing and teaching tool. It's one that I will, if opportunity arises, I'm happy to lend out. And that's kind of how I see its role within my book collection, just like the wider book collection going forwards, which is why I decided to pick up this newer edition of this book, despite having already bought it, read it, sold it. It has returned. Next, we have the debuts, and oh my gosh, I'm going to start with the one that I was anticipating the most. One of two that I was anticipating the most. The one that I hadn't read prior, and the one that was just absolutely made for me. And that is, of course, Yuki Kamitani's Shonen Note Boy Soprano. This is an 8-volume series complete in Japan, being released by Kodansha here in English. And oh my gosh, this series was made for me. This series is absolutely made for me, and when it was such a long shot license, I feel, and the fact that it's here, and it's in my hand, and it's a large trim size, and it's just beautiful. Everything about it is perfect, and knowing how much my good friend and co-host Ray from Whimsical Pictures adores this series as well, and how similar we are as in our tastes, I just couldn't wait. I'm still a little bit in disbelief that it even got licensed, and I'm already so in love with this series. So if you're not familiar, this is the same creator as Our Dreams at Dusk, as well as Nabari no O. This is their third series in print, I believe, although we do also have one of their other series, also from Kodansha, available digitally. This is the story of a young boy just starting middle school who has a real, like, innocent and pure and untouched quality to him. He just is, kind of this unsullied very optimistic, unusual, and absolutely infatuated um, kid who has a real sensitivity to sound. And after overhearing the choir, the school choir for the middle school that he's about to attend, he decides on the spot that he wants to join. And unlike a lot of the boys, although there are not many very boys in this choir, he is a soprano. Um, and not just any soprano, just this amazing, amazing soprano. Namely because obviously he's still quite young, he does have this innocence to him, but also he hasn't really hit puberty yet. There's kind of a ticking clock as to how long the kind of that beautiful soprano voice will last, because obviously when boys hit puberty their voices change and typically get deeper, and a lot of them, lose their singing voice, just in overall. It's obviously why historically there has been, for boy sopranos like the castrati, who were literally castrated to keep, and preserve that youthful and beautiful voice. Not anymore, thank goodness. We don't want to do that, but it isn't like totally out of the realm of possibility that this is something that's kind of always happened. Anyway, this is just such a quintessential Kamatani work. The emotionality of it, the raw, genuine, like human experience elements. I'm expecting there to be some elements of kind of queer storytelling in this, which is always something that Kamatani incorporates. And then, of course, their amazingly beautiful and evocative artwork that not only kind of depicts a scene, but explores it, expands upon it. There's always the symbology that isn't inherently literal, that just brings all of these layers of depth to their series, and it's so good. I also want to really give a shout out. That sounds so dumb, but Kodansha did such a good job on this book. The lettering is so good. Look at those sound effects. I love it. There's a lot of singing. The actual choice of fonts, maybe, I don't know. I'm not a specialist in this regard, but I just adore it so much. This is such a nice book, and for a series and for a creator like Kamatani, who does have so much love and care and purpose put into the artwork, it's so nice to see such a huge amount of work, and care being put into it from the English team. Another book that I was really looking forward to, this one I've actually already read, through the I read it through Manga Plus, but it's also on Shonen Jump. Oh my gosh, this is probably my favorite ongoing shonen series. Yeah, like this and a similar series that's just restarted. Well, that probably tells you a lot. But this is Dandadan by Yukinobu Tatsu. This is a ongoing, just amazing action shonen series about a boy and a girl, high school kids, who, man, they get into some wild instances, but the girl, she believes in ghosts, but she doesn't believe in aliens. The boy, he believes in aliens, but doesn't believe in, ghosts. That's dumb. They're not friends, they don't really know each other, but kind of through circumstance, They end up kind of like hanging out a little bit, and then together they run into not only the existence of ghosts and spirits, but also of aliens. In quite like I will preemptively say that there are some content warnings, especially for the first chapter of this um, volume, and it's something that runs a little bit throughout the series as a whole. It's which is kind of sexual violence towards our female character. It's not portrayed as a good thing, right? Like it is actually a bad thing. It's raising the stakes. It's showing the villainy of the villain. Um, but obviously, like content warning for that. If that's not your jam, that's okay. But yeah, after they kind of run into these supernatural things, our main female character, she develops kind of psychic or supernatural powers, spiritual powers, I should say, not supernatural, spiritual powers. And this guy, this kid, who's a big nerd as well, just by the way, because again they weren't friends. She's kind of like not super popular, but like a level of like popularity that's a little bit above norm. And then this guy who's like this big dork, big nerd and super into his alien stuff. And he develops also supernatural powers. He gets actually kind of possessed by a yokai. And oh my god, okay, guys, I love this series so much. I read it every week. The artwork is amazing. The action in it, like the actual fluidity of it, is fantastic. The relationship, the friendship, and kind of otherwise between these characters, our main characters, as well as all the side characters, is so good. It's really fun. It knows when to balance kind of its silliness and its wackiness and its like hard hitting emotional stuff. It's just really well balanced. It's one of those series that, like, I always say you don't have to be you don't have to kind of buck expectations or not be, following the expected tropes or whatever. But you legitimately don't really ever know what direction the series is going to go in. Every side character that they introduce is really fun and interesting. You grow to really love them, as well as our main characters, very, very quickly. The artwork is fantastic. And if this reminds you of like Chainsaw Man, then it should, because Tatsu was a assistant for Chainsaw Man, or for Fujimoto. I don't know if it was on Chainsaw Man. It might have been on Fire Punch. Regardless, if you like the vibe of Fujimoto's manga, which obviously I do, this is really one you should check out. As I said, it's available to read in its entirety on Manga Plus. It's also available to read in its entirety so far on the Viz website, not the app, just because of kind of content issues. The same way that like all of their kind of racier and more violent series are kept off of the app. There is there's a lot of crude and crass humor, which is legitimately so funny. I laugh at so many like dick and ball jokes in this series. It's not funny. And it's such a good time. And that silliness, that levity is just so nice when you do have kind of this mishmash of really fun characters and high stakes and just general silliness, but taken really seriously. Dandadan's honestly like fantastic. I've said it before. I really love that this kind of trend of weird quote unquote shonen is very popular right now between this and Chainsaw Man, and then kind of to a lesser extent something like Jujutsu Kaisen. I'm just honestly like I love it. This is exactly my kind of thing. And if it sounds like your kind of thing, check it out. But being part of like Viz's main, I think this is, yeah, from the Shonen Jump line. I'm sure a lot of people are trying it anyway. But if you are not like that familiar with it, you don't really know anything about it, and you're kind of been sitting on the fence, check it out. It's really good. This is the other debut that I read. I do have one more, but I haven't read it yet. And that is a Yuri series called She Loves to Cook, She Loves to Eat by Sakomi Yuzaki. So this is the story of two neighbors, two women, one who loves to cook but actually can't eat a huge amount herself, and then her next door neighbor who I'm not going to say doesn't know how to cook, but she doesn't like have the energy or time or interest in cooking, but she can absolutely eat like no matter. Oh my gosh, she loves eating. She eats a huge amount, and is often quite like self-conscious in the way that how much she eats, or well, self-conscious because of, you know, misogyny in what like how women should eat and what women should eat. So they kind of run into each other one day despite having lived next to each other. They hadn't really ever met. Coincidentally, after our main character kind of overcompensated, she cooked far too much, and so she invites this other woman over, feeds her, and a tentative friendship kind of rolls from there. It's a kind of low-key, I presume slow burn Yuri series about these two women and being brought together by food. And honestly, like, that should be just tick all of my boxes. I love food manga. I'm a big fan of Yuri. Well, I love like stories about kind of like adult women, older women. Yuri that isn't just focused on high school dynamics. I love kind of domestic or romance series and slice of life series focused on domestic day-to-day life. That doesn't need kind of, I mean, honestly, to kind of a certain extent, this is a little bit like a gender bent series or a flipped gendered series of that I love, which is What Did You Eat Yesterday by Fumi Yoshinaga. But I don't know what it was about this series. I didn't like it very much, which was a surprise and a little bit of a letdown. I don't know what I expected inherently, because I don't try to go into series with a lot of expectation aside from like if I already know that I love a creator, in the case of like Shonen Note, or if I've typically like enjoyed a series of this ilk previously. So I guess I did have higher expectations for it, but it didn't quite click with me. And I think the main reason is one, and this isn't really a negative impact on the series, but despite one of our characters loving to cook, we don't get a huge breakdown of like what she's cooking or how to make. It's not a food manga in the same way that like a lot of other food manga are basically just a recipe book, but with, you know, comic drawings are in comic form. It's not that. You don't get a step by step guide on like how to make, well, I don't know, omo rice or katsu curry or whatever, right? It's not that. It's just like, oh, I'm gonna make this food, and it just like she does. You see it, but there's no like, oh, you cut X amount of onions, and then you do this, and then you start with the roux and blah blah blah. Like, it's none of that. Secondly, and this is something that I think is what kind of maybe put me off, is that, and it sounds maybe really bad, but I didn't find any of the food didn't look attractive, for one, as well. Like, for something that's meant to be about like a celebration of food or food bringing people together, the food wasn't that interesting, or it didn't make me want to eat food. Which, as someone who loves to eat, I do think is a bit of a failure. Also, like, the actual eating of that food, and again, maybe this sounds maybe bad in this context of like what the story is saying, but it's not very attractive. Like, the way that the eating is depicted in the series isn't attractive, insofar as, like, I know that the character enjoyed the food. I know that like, this is a delicious meal and whatever, but there wasn't a lot of like love put into the depicting the eating aspect of it either. It's missing some things that make it feel like, I don't know, real, quote unquote. It lacks the genuine nature, that reaction of like, oh my gosh, this is delicious, that you see in food manga a lot, and even in like romance manga that isn't about food, but like has a chapter where someone makes their crush some food. There's that, even if it tastes bad, there's like, oh my gosh, this tastes so good, or like, oh, but like there's commentary on it. There's not a huge amount of that in here. If there is, I've forgotten it. But like, yeah, the act of eating isn't portrayed with a lot of love. The act of cooking isn't portrayed with a lot of love. And for a series literally called She Loves to Cook and She Loves to Eat, there's not a lot of love in either of those actions. So, yeah, it just fell flat for me, and I won't be picking up the next volume in print. I might check out the next volume digitally just to see if it kind of improves and finds its feet a little bit more. But unfortunately, and it's a rarity, but it does happen. Unfortunately, this really wasn't one that I enjoyed. But if you are looking for kind of a more domestic Yuri about adult women, then maybe check this one out. But I personally can't recommend it, especially having like other food manga and food like romance manga to compare it to. The other series have done it better. They might not be like gay, with like two ladies even, but there's better options out there. So unfortunately, this was a bit of a bummer for me. The last debut that I got for this month is Imaginary. This has been released by Seven Seas by Niro Ikuhara Hana. This is actually a creator who has some hentai published in English. I don't think any of their other manga has. Faku, I believe, put out their collection Ordinary Days, something like that. Intimate Days, which is actually very good and like a interesting and quite diverse collection of, well, smutty erotic stories, right? And this Imaginary is kind of like, it's not a hentai for one, but it is, I believe, meant to be about like relationships and rekindling relationships and feelings, and presumably with a creator who has some experience in that space. They're not too prudish to show kind of more adult and intimate situations. Again, I can't speak to it because I haven't read this volume. But I've seen quite mixed takes on this one, so I don't know whether it's a slow starter or if it just doesn't really suit this style of story. I don't know. Of course, I will actually read it myself to be able to form an opinion, but as for right now, I haven't read it. I have, enjoyed the previous work of this creator, this mangaka, in like kind of a more genuine way than just like, oh, it's porn. um but it'll be interesting to see if they're able to work with a longer form story, which can sometimes be, the downfall of an otherwise very talented creator. I'll have to see. I don't know. We have the ongoing manga. I'll start with the standard size trim. Certain trim size, I should say. And I'll start with the shoujo beat stuff. So first up, we have My Love Mix-Up by Aruko and Wataru Hinekure. This is a complete in 9 volumes series about the messy and ongoing issues with teen relationships, notably our main characters, not these two, who, after kind of some big shenanigans and misunderstandings, our main male character has fallen for one of his male classmates, and surprisingly to him, has kind of done well for himself. They're currently in the tentative first steps of dating. His feelings are being treated as valid. We do also have these two characters kind of in a simmering side couple space, which, despite me not usually liking huge cast of characters and everyone getting matched off with each other, I do think it's handled quite well in this series. I really enjoy this one. It's one that I've encouraged people to try before. It's very fun, very sweet. It's hilarious because Aruko is fantastic at expressions. Look at some of these faces. Oh, there's nothing that weirdo in this one, but they make some funny faces. This one we have drama about, again, misunderstandings. These kids need to communicate. We've got some jealousy. We've got some, also, yeah, this first part, it's been a little while. It's been a couple weeks since I read this, but the first part of this book, it handles something very well, which is our main character, is being tutored, or he's going to cram school, I should say. And he gets on really well with his tutor, who's this older guy, goes to university, and they get on really well. They're quite friendly with each other. He's really improving with his study, and he kind of gets encouraged and egged on by this older guy about his relationship after he finds out he's dating someone. And it's all good until this college student finds out that he doesn't have a girlfriend, he has a boyfriend. And so then this kind of inherent, or this reaction of bigotry and homophobia of oh, sorry, I don't, oh, it just immediately caused some distance between them, which at first our main character really tries to play off and just oh, well, that sucks, right? Man, he kind of tries to play it off a bit, but not deep down, quite obviously he's very hurt that this guy who he legitimately thought he was kind of his friend and that he was happy to hang out with and got on really well with, like would immediately just completely change his attitude and their dynamic after learning something about him that just didn't fit the norm. And the way that that was handled was just so beautifully done. Um, these kids are so good, and I think like I've said before with this series, the fact that our main character, his interest in guys, his bisexuality, is handled so with such like genuine care, and all like his friends and his now boyfriend like treats his feelings as valid, even if he doesn't try to, even if he doesn't want to like be a bother, or doesn't think his problems or his feelings are important, to acknowledge, or big enough problems, quote unquote, to like worry about. It's just really good, and it's very heartwarming, and kind of the resolution to that happened quite quickly and quite well as well. Obviously, the story really called out this homophobia for what it was, and it was just really good. I think it handled a very what can be a very sensitive topic and prickly situation with a lot of grace, and without like inherently demonizing either side as well, because ultimately this uni student, like, he's not a bad or hateful person, but he just didn't realize like how much hurt something like that attitude, what his comments and his shift in attitude and tone could do, and also again his inherent bigotry that he's just been kind of socialized to feel, that he's never examined. It's really, really good, and this series we're over halfway now, with volume 5, and I'm actually glad that it is a shorter series as well. I find that short and sweet is really all you need for this kind of like high school rom-com. And if you like high school rom-coms, if you like queer stories, check it out. Next is Snow White with the Red Hair, volume 21 by Sorata Akiduki. This is the most recent volume of this. What else do I need to say? This is a romance story. Like, I don't want to say fantasy, maybe royalist romance about a girl called Shirayuki who's training to become a court herbalist, and the prince that she's in love with. And just kind of all the things happening around them. Their friends, their allies, their the challenges that they go through, both as like together and also as individuals. It's a fantastic series. It's one that I always make the joke that like this legitimately has such an OT3, and it just does. You can't deny it. But yeah, this is a fantastic series. I really, really enjoy whenever we get a new volume. It's just very good. It makes me smile. It warms my heart. It's just a good time. And every single volume just continues to be wonderful. It's not gonna... Well, I don't know, obviously, but it never kind of dips in quality. It continues to build off of like this wonderful dynamic amongst all the characters that it's already established, and it allows the world and the people within it to really feel authentic and to grow and change and develop on their own in a very, very genuine way. Yeah, it's a good time, it's funny, and it can have some real great action in there as well. A lot of political intrigue, and yeah, it's definitely worth the read if it sounds like your thing. I know there's kind of a lot of similar or same-ish, romance, royalty romance series, but this one for me really stands out above the crowd, especially within kind of a more European setting. It's very good. And of course, we have the other phenomenal action, romance, political drama, low fantasy series that is Yona of the Dawn by Mizuho Kusanagi. This is volume 37. I mean, of course, the series just continues to be fantastic. I love, love, love the series so much, and I say this with every single volume. The amount that this series has grown and changed and evolved. The characters are phenomenal. The plot is fantastic, and it never gets bogged down in one aspect of its plot for too long. There's some real variety in the issues and the way that those issues are solved within the series. Of course, like, you have a wonderful relationship dynamic between the characters, both romantic and platonic and otherwise. It just has such a interesting spread of and interesting and well done understanding of, like, the difficult nature of leadership and helping people and contributing in ways that, contributing to societies and to people, and conflicting views, and kind of managing that as well. Yona of the Dawn is fantastic. It's one of my all-time favorite series, definitely one of my favorite ongoing series, and I could just read this series forever. It's certainly one of the longer ones in my collection. It's not quite the longest, but it's certainly getting there. And if you're not reading Yona of the Dawn, if you haven't tried it, give it a shot. Give it maybe a 2-volume try, because it really picks up from its early foundations very quickly and is definitely worth the read. For the standard size manga volume, we have a Yen Press title. This is volume 16 of Aida Iro's Toilet Bound Hanako-kun. Oh my god, it's so good. We get a lot of insight to Hanako-kun's backstory in this one. We see a lot of, like, how certain things have come to be, why the story functions, and how the villain functions as well within the series. The gray morality between humans and the supernatural. It's just, oh my god, the emotional weight of the series. I love it. It's fantastic. I mean, I say this every time in regards to the series, but if the title, like, puts you off, definitely try it. Like, it's not anything about toilets. It doesn't have any, like, fetishes in it. That's just kind of a function of the supernatural creature that is being mentioned or referred to in this. Referenced, that's the word I'm looking for. Referenced. The urban legend that's being referenced in the series. It's so good. It's so good. It's very funny, especially early on in the series, but right now, even now, with kind of the absolutely devastating storylines and plot elements that is this series, this one does still have time to be funny. The art is really quirky and interesting. It's got fantastic style, and it just captures what the series needs to be very, very well. If you haven't tried it, check out the anime as well. It's so good. So yeah, try it, and hopefully you will enjoy it, because it is one that I always look forward to the next volume. So much so that I've actually read ahead via the digital editions, because this one does get a digital first release from Yen. And it just I'm just oh my god. Oh my god, I love this series so much. Larger trim manga, we have The Witch and the Beast from Kodansha by Kosuke Satake. This is an ongoing dark fantasy story about I guess a brawler is maybe the right word. A brawler and a mage who are looking for a witch in order to break a curse, and then sort of all the different magical happenings and bureaucracy happening around them. Witches are not inherently good things. In this, they're typically villains causing chaos and destruction, but that doesn't mean that the enforcers who are around to try and keep them in line are inherently good either. There's some really interesting and fun aspects of the series. Really, really great if you enjoy kind of the Western fantasy, especially witches. There's a lot of it, a lot of that type of story in manga happening, or being licensed and released right now. This is a really solid one. We just wrapped up a storyline about vampires, if that's your thing. I don't know how long this series will be. It feels like it's slowly ticking into kind of the latter stage of the story, so hopefully not too long. And there's some really, really wonderful dynamic art that portrays the action in this series. So if you're one who cares about being able to follow action and understand what's going on, this one is definitely worth the read. It also really perfectly captures the atmosphere with really lush, deep blacks, and really fun and interesting character designs as well. It's worth the read. It's interesting, and with this volume we've just started a new storyline. So I'm looking forward to seeing where this part of the story goes. Speaking of dark fantasy, we have The Girl from the Other Side, Shilarun, the deluxe edition for Nagabe. This is a story about a little girl and a monstrous creature who live together and kind of have their day-to-day lives, also whilst they're running away from, the people who are wanting to tear them apart and to kidnap this little girl. And there's a larger mystery as to what's going on and what's happening and why are these creatures coming from, and because there's the idea that they know that these creatures are people who have been infected by this curse. Typically they lose kind of all human rationality and understanding and humanity, but our main character, Teacher, has not, and so he's a little bit of an oddity. And our main character, female main character, Shiva, this little girl, is really the only person who isn't corrupted and infected by this disease when touching people who are. I have read the entirety of the main story of this. I bought the singles as they came out. It was one that I sold on after these deluxe editions were announced, because one, if you're not familiar with Nagabe's artwork, it is absolutely gorgeous. Talk about atmospheric. It is fantastic, and I really wanted kind of the best version of the story. I love this series. It's sweet and kind and bittersweet and soft in ways that you don't inherently expect from the plot of the story, but it's just so wonderfully done. Nagabe is fantastic at monster designs as well, obviously, the furry that he is. But yeah, this is a fantastic series. I'm sure most people are aware of it, have read it in some capacity, and I'm really happy that we are getting such lovely, wonderful re-releases through these omnibus. So yeah, and it's been a great time rereading the series as well. We have volume 2 of Canis, Dear Hatter by Zach. This was put out by Kuma. You can tell I haven't read it yet because it is still in its plastic. This is a really wonderful BL story. Very slow developing, slow burn BL about a hatter. Well, that's not what they're called. Milliner, hat maker. And a guy who he just kind of like rescues off the street one day, and their relationship, both romantic and otherwise, and this mysterious guy may just be a little bit more than he appears, may have a darker background than anyone would have expected. It's very good. This series has a spin-off as well. Like, this is technically a sequel spin-off to the original Canis, which is Dear Mr. Rain. And then there's this 2-volume sequel, and then there's a 3-volume sequel to that, which I believe focuses on other characters. Not the 2 for this story. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But it is one. It's probably my favorite of Kuma's BL that they've put out. I believe I've read everything they've released. Maybe. I don't think, maybe not Wild Ones or whatever that one's called. But this is by far my favorite, and I really hope we get more of this style of story from them. I do have some of their other titles pre-ordered. I do think that it's really interesting diversity of stories that they've put out so far, but this one is well worth the read. Very interesting, and if you like your BL with plot, especially kind of more serious plot along the lines of like Twittering Birds Never Fly, then check this one out. Novels. I haven't read this one yet because I wait until I have all of the volumes for a particular part so I can read them all at once, but this is Ascendance of a Bookworm. I'll Do Anything to Become a Librarian, Part 4, Founder of the Royal Academy's So-Called Library Committee, Volume 3, by Mia Kazuki, and with illustrations from Yoshina. What a mouthful. This is a light novel series. I mean, it's a very popular series. I'm sure most people are familiar with it, following our main character, Main or Mine, depending on translation and version, who, after being isekai'd into this fantasy world as a sickly young girl, has decided to make it her mission to bring books and printing and publishing to this society, something that has really been, well, I mean, her real goal is to become a librarian, as is in the title, but as part of that, she is inadvertently creating the printing press and publishing and the opening the availability of books to lower society. It's a very good series, one that I love, and I can't wait to start part 4 because this series is one that just like keeps escalating. This is another one that you can never really have expectations for because they always exceed them and always go in directions that you never expect. This one was actually started life as a web novel, like a lot of light novels do nowadays, um, which is not inherently a good or a bad thing. That's just an observation of the realities, but it is very good. It has an anime adaptation. I have seen first two seasons of. I know there's a more recent season. I haven't watched that one. Which adapts part one. I think maybe part one and part two, or part one and part of part. I don't know. It adapts some of it, but it is worth watching, or it is worth experiencing, whether that is through the novel. There's also a manga adaptation, or of course the anime. They're all decently solid. Personally, I always tend to find the source material as like the best version to experience. That's not always the case inherently, but in this case, I would recommend the light novel. So yeah, check it out if you haven't, although I'm sure most of you guys are well aware of this series. We have the newest volume of one of my favorite light novel. Well, I mean, I don't follow a series if I don't enjoy it, but one that I was really looking forward to. It's been a little while since the most recent volume, or the previous volume, I should say, and that is Baccano by Ryogo Narita. This is volume 20, 1931 Winter, the time of the oasis. I know nothing about what this particular story is about. Looking as the cover does have jacuzzi, I suspect we will be following him and his friends. Looks like Rail is on there as well. We'll have to find out. I don't know. I think, yeah, the back says we're back at the Flying Pussyfoot, which it's not a bad thing. I mean, the name is silly and certainly gets some giggles whenever it's mentioned, but it is, I think, I personally, I love almost all of the characters in Baccano. But I really do love Jacuzzi and his crew, and whenever it's like focused on them, and also like the Flying Pussyfoot kind of chaos and event that was, I'm always happy to read that because I know it's gonna be a good time. I really enjoy Baccano. I like Narita's works kind of generally, but I do think that Baccano is his best work. I may be a little bit inherently biased there, but it is true. And so I haven't read this one yet, but I'm really looking forward to it. And we are really getting close to where the series has been on hiatus. I think there's like 21 or 22 volumes in Japanese. So yeah, we've pretty much caught up. And then I'm going to be sad because I want to read more, and I also want to finish the series, and I think Narita probably wants to finish it too. So, I mean, if that was the case, if you did that, then we'd both be happy. Because it's always better when a story has a resolution and conclusion. For light novels, this is a debut series. I was really looking forward to it. I haven't had the chance to read it yet. Story of my life. But this is released by Seven Seas' Airship imprint. And so, this is volume 1 of The Case Files of Jeweler Richard by Nanako Sujimura with illustrations by Utako Yukihiro. Yeah, so I've seen the anime adaptation of this. We also have the manga adaptation in English as well from Seven Seas. But, once again, I do enjoy multiple adaptations and variations on the same story, but namely I do try to read or watch or whatever the original, kind of the formative foundational piece. And in this case, it is the light novel. So if you're not familiar with this is kind of a very, very slow burn, low key. I think technically this is a BL novel. but the BL elements are that slow, oh my gosh, slow burn, low key element. It's, these two aren't jumping into bed by the end of this first volume. It really isn't that. But this is the story of a normalish Japanese university student who one day rescues a foreign beauty, who is the titular jeweler Richard. He helps him from being stopping him being attacked by something's happening. I can't remember. I haven't read this, as I said, and I can only remember bits and pieces of the anime. He's either gotten stuck in a situation. I want to say he's being attacked by crows, but I don't think that's the case. I might just be misremembering pretty seriously. If that is what happened, I'm gonna laugh because that's quite funny. Anyway, he helps him out. I think actually he helps him find the place that he's looking for. And because Richard is a recent arrival, he is opening up a jewelry store, and a jewel appraiser, gem appraisal, and he hires on our main character as kind of his, I don't want to say personal assistant. He just gives him a part-time job to not only show his thanks, but because our main character seems very interested in the work and also absolutely captivated by Richard himself, who is a little bit of a mystery, a little bit of an enigma, and has some stuff going on in his personal history that is not inherently very obvious. Well, maybe it is very obvious, but not inherently explicitly told. So the main structure of the novel, as is the main structure of the show, is quite episodic. Each chapter focuses on a different person who brings in a different gemstone, and then that gem typically has some kind of history or problem or story attached to it, which our main characters then kind of help resolve. I can't speak to the level of writing in this, but I know this is a cult favorite of a lot of people. The series really has some very long, the anime's not super old. It's probably 4 or 5 years old at this point. Yeah, probably that old. But has a really dedicated and devoted fan base, and I enjoyed the anime. I'm not reading the manga just because if there's a light novel, I tend to read that instead, as I've mentioned before. But I've read quite a few fan comics of the series. It's one that definitely interests me. I did enjoy what I've seen of it. And as someone who is a rock person as well, I'm oh, wow. But the way that I've heard the relationship that in this one being spoken of, especially in regards to the exploration of gender and sexuality, for the main character, not Richard, the other one, in his journey of self-realization is very, very well done. I can't speak to that. I don't know. I haven't read it. But I find that aspect very interesting. Plus, I just really like the premise anyway. So yeah, this was one that I was really looking forward to, and I hope to jump in and start reading as soon as I can. Finally, speaking of gay, we have the most recent Danmai from Seven Seas, and this is MXTX's Heaven Official's Blessing, Tianguan Sifu, Volume 4. I haven't read this one either, which is such a shame because look at that cover. Damn, I love this is There's no favorites. There's no favorites in my heart, but I do really enjoy this couple. They're dynamic. They're very, comparatively to MXTX's other couples who are just like so chaotic. There's always stuff going on. And not to say that there isn't chaos in Heaven Official's Blessing, but the relationship is very solid. It's very, it's like these characters inherently trust each other, know each other, and like act like they've been together for, you know, there's no misunderstandings, there's no gay panic, there's no like worry about, you know, what people will think, because these guys are 800 years old and they're just over it. They're just over it. They don't have to worry about any of that shit. It's wonderful, just like generally. I will say that of MXTX's works, this probably is my favorite, but again, we don't play favorites. But I do think that this is probably the strongest of her work, despite Modal Zushi maybe being the most popular of her works, namely just because the like animated version is so popular and also complete. Donghwang, that's the word I was looking for. But regardless, this is a great series. I'm a big fan. I'll read it soon, hopefully. So yeah, it's just another one to hopefully put in this put in the pile to read, and hopefully be able to read sooner rather than later. Everything that I got for this month, quite a few like debuts, some huge expectations, and some disappointments as well, unfortunately. But let me know your thoughts, feelings, opinions on any of the titles that I talked about today. If you've read them, if you're collecting them, if you've never heard of them, I like hearing all of those. As I said, I'm still kind of like trying to figure out where I want to film, how I want to do this, with this new home that I'm in. So there's going to be a little bit of adjustment for a while. Apologies in advance. But I hope you will stick around with me regardless throughout that. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I will catch you in the next video. Bye till then.